It was supposed to be a routine flight. A quick business trip to finalize a deal that could make or break the quarter. I had secured the first-class seat weeks ahead, booked, confirmed, and even double-checked the details. So when I approached the gate, I didn't expect anything out of the ordinary. But things took an unexpected turn. I handed over my ticket to the gate agent, a young woman with a tired expression. She scanned it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Then, she looked at the screen in front of her, and her brow furrowed. She took a second longer than usual, and that's when I knew something was off. "Sir, there's been a mix-up. We've reassigned your seat," she said, her voice flat, as if she didn't think I'd object. I paused for a second, trying to process what she was saying. Reassigned? My seat was confirmed. First class, 1A. She barely looked up from her screen as she gestured towards the back of the plane. "We've given it to someone else, but we've upgraded you to 2A. I couldn't believe it. First class to business. It felt like an insult. Why? I asked, trying to mask my frustration. She seemed distracted, not meeting my eyes. We had to accommodate a priority passenger. I felt my pulse quicken. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right. This wasn't just a scheduling error, it felt deliberate. But the next thing she said stopped me in my tracks. "We've also adjusted your seat on the upgrade list, and I'm afraid, you'll need to sit elsewhere today." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. This was business, after all. There were bigger stakes, but this felt personal. I stepped away from the gate, my mind spinning. First class, gone. And for what? The seat was reassigned to someone else, but no explanation was given. I watched the passengers around me, all heading to their seats with no idea of the power dynamics at play. As I made my way toward the business class section, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The mood in the cabin was tense, but not in the way you'd expect from a plane full of anxious travelers. It was more like a strange sense of anticipation, a quiet knowing among the crew that something was about to go down. I took my seat in 2A, the farthest from the front, and tried to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. I'd been traveling for years, and I'd never been treated like this. But what bothered me the most wasn't just the seat. It was how dismissive the gate agent had been. She had barely made an effort to apologize, like she knew this was just part of some bigger plan. The flight attendants were already bustling around, checking on passengers, preparing drinks, and making small talk. But one thing struck me: the crew seemed to be looking at each other with nervous glances, whispers exchanged when they thought no one was watching. The anxiety was palpable. And that's when I realized, this wasn't about the seat. This was about something much bigger. As the flight continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just any other passenger. I had spent years in corporate strategy, making deals worth millions, and I understood the importance of a seat at the table. This wasn't a simple mistake. Someone had deliberately made the decision to move me. But why? I had to find out. About halfway through the flight, I was doing my best to keep my mind off the incident. My laptop was out, and I was reviewing some reports when a flight attendant approached me. "Excuse me, sir," she said in a soft tone, clearly trying to avoid drawing attention. "The captain would like to speak with you." I raised an eyebrow. I hadn't been contacted by the captain on any of my previous flights. This was starting to feel more like a setup, and not in a way that was comfortable. I followed the flight attendant down the narrow aisle, my thoughts racing. What was this all about? As we reached the galley, she gestured for me to step inside. I didn't say a word, but I knew something was wrong. The captain was standing by the galley, a tall, middle-aged man with sharp eyes that seemed to study me with every passing second. His expression was unreadable, his posture straight, but there was an underlying tension that I couldn't ignore. "Mr. Ford," he greeted me, his voice cold. "We've had some complications regarding the seating arrangements." "I'm aware," I said, my patience wearing thin. But what I'm not aware of is why I was moved from my seat without explanation. The captain hesitated, his eyes flickering nervously. You see, the seat reassignment was, not my decision. He paused, as if trying to gauge my reaction. It was a corporate matter, sir. An issue that has nothing to do with you, really. A corporate matter? That made no sense. Everything in my gut told me this was more than just a minor inconvenience. I crossed my arms. A corporate matter? And what does that mean for me? I've been a loyal customer for years, and I don't appreciate being treated like this. The captain's face tightened, but he quickly recovered. I understand your frustration, sir. But there's nothing we can do. The decision has been made. His eyes shifted, and I noticed the slightest flicker of unease in them. That doesn't explain why my seat was taken, I pressed. And why it's so important to keep this matter quiet. For the first time, the captain broke his stoic demeanor. There are consequences, Mr. Ford. You don't know it yet, but you're involved in something far bigger than you realize. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there in the galley with more questions than answers. The remainder of the flight was a blur. I could barely focus on the work in front of me, my mind replaying the captain's words over and over. You're involved in something far bigger than you realize. What the hell did that even mean? And why had I been the one affected? As the plane began its descent, I tried to pull myself together. I needed answers. But first, I had to land. Once we touched down, the atmosphere on the plane shifted. The crew was suddenly more alert, moving with purpose as if they were preparing for something significant. I could feel the tension in the air like static electricity, but no one would explain it to me. I waited in my seat, watching the hurried activity unfold around me, but none of the staff made eye contact. The moment I stepped into the airport terminal, I got a call. It was from an unlisted number. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Mr. Ford, a deep, unfamiliar voice greeted me. I trust you're having a smooth landing. I froze. Who is this? Let's just say I'm someone who knows about your recent inconvenience. I also know that you're curious about the seat reassignment and the captain's warning. You want to know what's going on. I was speechless. This person knew too much, and something in their voice felt menacing, like they were controlling the situation from the shadows. Who are you? I demanded. What do you want from me? The voice chuckled softly. What I want doesn't matter, Mr. Ford. What you need to understand is that your seat was just the beginning. There's a much larger game being played, and you've just been pulled into it. As for your budget concerns, well, that's part of the plan, too. A cold wave of realization hit me. Budget? What budget? I was the head of an investment firm, but I had no idea what this person was referring to. You're involved with a certain corporation. And as of right now, the voice continued, your $120 million project fund is on hold. Frozen. For reasons you'll soon understand. I felt my heart race. My company's budget, frozen. The one that had been in the works for months. It didn't make sense. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't a random flight mishap. This was calculated. Why? I asked, my voice tight. Because, Mr. Ford, some decisions come with consequences. Your seat was taken to send a message. You're being watched. And now, we control the next move. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stood in the crowded airport terminal, feeling the weight of the conversation settle like a brick in my chest. My mind raced, my $120 million budget was frozen, and I had no idea why or how. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the reassignment of my seat was just the first part of a much larger, far more complicated scheme. I needed to get to the bottom of this, and fast. The voice on the phone had been clear, you're being watched. It was unsettling, but it also confirmed something I had been trying to ignore. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about power, control, and manipulation. I checked my phone for any emails or messages that could shed light on what had happened, but there was nothing. The silence was deafening. No one from my company had contacted me. The flight crew? Non-existent. It was as if the entire world had shut me out, and I was left to flounder in a sea of uncertainty. I decided to head back to my office. At least there, I'd have the resources to figure out what was going on. My mind raced with possibilities, but none of them made sense. The project fund had been secured through months of negotiation, signed contracts, and a mountain of paperwork. There was no reason, no legitimate reason, why it should have been frozen. But then, a thought hit me. What if it wasn't about the project at all? What if the seat reassignment, the captain's strange behavior, and the cryptic phone call were all pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even begun to see? I arrived at my office just as the sun was setting, the golden light filtering through the blinds. It felt like the calm before a storm, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something major was on the horizon. I immediately walked into my assistant's office, hoping she could offer some clarity. "Emily," I said, my voice low. "Do you know anything about a $120 million project freeze?" Her eyes widened, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked nervous. She quickly glanced around the room, checking to make sure no one else was listening. "I've been trying to figure it out," she said, lowering her voice. "There's been a strange shift in the funding allocation. It's like someone pulled the strings from above and everything just stopped." "Who?" I asked. "Who pulled the strings?" She hesitated for a moment, then leaned in closer. "There are rumors, but they're just rumors. No one knows for sure, but it's said that someone with significant influence in the corporate world has decided to make an example of you. They're sending a message." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My seat was more than just a random assignment, it was part of a deliberate tactic. I wasn't just a businessman anymore. I was a pawn in someone's game. As Emily's words sank in, a new wave of anger began to build inside me. I had spent years building my reputation, my company, my legacy. The idea that I could be manipulated by unseen forces was infuriating. But there was more at play here than I realized. I was no longer dealing with a petty corporate issue or a miscommunication on a flight. This was a power play, a chess match where I had just been moved into a position of vulnerability. I couldn't sit idly by and wait for whoever was behind this to make their next move. The mystery surrounding the seat reassignment, the captain's cryptic warning, and the freeze on my funding had all started to feel connected. Whoever this was wanted to put me in my place, to remind me that no matter how high I had risen in the business world, I was still small in their eyes. "I need to find out who's behind this," I said to Emily, my voice steady despite the storm of thoughts racing through my head. "Do you want me to make some calls?" she asked, her tone reluctant. I thought for a moment before shaking my head. "No. I'll handle it. I don't trust anyone right now." There was a brief silence before she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Ford, there's someone I think you need to talk to. Someone who might have more insight." "Who?" I asked, not sure whether I wanted to hear the answer. She hesitated. "A contact in the financial department, Jonas King. He's been working on the back end of our accounts for years, and he has a reputation for getting into things others wouldn't dare. He's discreet." "Discreet?" I repeated. "What exactly does that mean?" Emily didn't answer directly. Instead, she stood up and reached for her phone, quickly dialing a number. "Let me see if I can get him on the line." I paced around the office as the seconds ticked by, my mind spinning. If Jonas King had the information I needed, it could be the break I was looking for. But I knew there was a risk. If I was too public about this, whoever was behind it would know I was onto them. And they might take even more drastic steps to silence me. The phone rang once, twice, then a third time before Emily spoke into it. "Jonas? It's Emily. I need a favor." I couldn't hear what Jonas said on the other end of the line, but I could tell from Emily's expression that she was getting the answers she needed. She nodded slowly, then looked up at me. "He'll meet with you. But it'll have to be discreet. He wants to talk at a cafe downtown, away from anyone who might be watching." "Good. I'm going," I said, turning on my heel. "And if this goes anywhere, you don't know a thing about it." The cafe was tucked away in a quiet part of the city, far from the bustling streets. The kind of place where people went to disappear, to hold conversations that needed to be kept under wraps. As I entered, I spotted Jonas King immediately. He was sitting in the back corner, a newspaper spread out in front of him, but his eyes never left the door. He was a tall man, with a lean build, dressed in a simple gray jacket and dark jeans, looking every bit the part of someone who operated in the shadows. I took a deep breath and walked over to him, trying to shake off the sense of unease that had been creeping up my spine since Emily had suggested this meeting. "Mr. King," I greeted him, sitting down across from him. He didn't smile, didn't acknowledge the formalities. His eyes were sharp, calculating. "I assume you're here about the budget freeze." I didn't waste time with pleasantries. "How do you know about that?" Jonas folded his newspaper, setting it aside, and leaned in slightly. "I keep an eye on things. People like you, people who deal in large sums of money, don't just get their funds frozen without someone pulling strings. You're being targeted." "Targeted by who?" I asked, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. "And why?" Jonas sat back, tapping his fingers on the table, clearly choosing his words carefully. "There are a lot of powerful people in this city, Mr. Ford. And some of them think you've overstepped your bounds. You're part of a larger project, a merger that's going to shake up industries. But your involvement with that project isn't sitting well with certain individuals. They see you as a threat, and they're sending a message." I felt the blood rush from my face. "A threat? I'm just a businessman." "Exactly," Jonas interrupted. "You're not just any businessman. You're the man at the helm of a $120 million deal that could change everything. And for the people behind this, that's a problem. They can't have you pulling the strings." I leaned forward, my pulse quickening. "So they froze my budget over a merger deal?" Jonas nodded slowly. "They want to make sure you know who's really in charge here. You're not the one calling the shots, not yet. The sooner you accept that, the better." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just a frozen budget, it was a warning. They had already made their move, and now they were waiting for me to react. "What do I do now?" I asked, feeling the weight of the situation settle on me like a boulder. Jonas looked at me with a steely gaze. "You need to figure out who's behind this. And you need to make them understand that you won't be intimidated." I stared at him for a long moment, trying to process everything he had just told me. "How do I find them?" Jonas gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. "That's the tricky part. But I can help you get closer. There are always cracks in the system. You just have to know where to look." The meeting with Jonas left me feeling both enlightened and more confused than ever. I now knew that my seat reassignment, the captain's strange behavior, and the budget freeze were all part of a bigger game. But understanding that didn't make it any easier to navigate. I spent the next few days digging through my company's accounts, trying to find any leads. Jonas had given me a direction, but every time I thought I had a solid lead, it turned out to be a dead end. Whoever was behind this had covered their tracks well, manipulating things from a distance, using people and systems to do their bidding. It wasn't until I had a quiet moment at my office late one night, poring over a set of encrypted financial records, that I saw it, the one crack I had been looking for. A strange, anonymous transfer had been made between two shell companies linked to major investors in the merger deal. The transaction was small, but the pattern was unmistakable. It was the smoking gun I needed. I traced the transaction back to a name that was tied to one of the most influential people in the business world, Victor Hunt, a corporate titan known for playing the game ruthlessly. He had been quietly pushing against the merger, and I realized now that he had been behind the entire operation to undermine me. His motives weren't just business, they were personal. He saw me as a threat to his empire, and this was his way of warning me to stay out of his way. I didn't hesitate. I made the call. "Victor Hunt," I said, my voice cold, confident. "I know what you've been doing. And I won't back down." There was a long pause on the other end. "Mr. Ford," Victor's voice finally came through, smooth and calculating. "I must say, I'm impressed. You're more resourceful than I gave you credit for." "I don't play games," I shot back. "You think freezing my budget is going to intimidate me? You're mistaken." Victor's laugh echoed through the line, but it didn't sound amused. "You've made a powerful enemy, Ford. But you also made the mistake of thinking you were in control. There's a reason people like you are only pawns in the grand scheme of things." "Maybe," I replied, my voice steady, "but pawns can make moves, too. And this pawn isn't giving up without a fight." The line went silent for a moment, and then Victor spoke again, his tone softer. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But let me make something clear, you've crossed a line, and there's no turning back from this. Your $120 million. It's not just frozen anymore. It's done." The word stung, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. The fight wasn't over. I wasn't going to let Victor Hunt or anyone else push me around. I hung up, a sense of resolve settling in. I had no idea what was coming next, but I was ready. This wasn't just a business battle anymore, it was a fight for everything I had worked for. And no one, no matter how powerful, was going to take that from me.